Hello and welcome to the Grid pre-race show. We're doing IndyCar at Portland and NASCAR at Watkins, Glen. I am Tanner Ballard, and with me today is Matthew Bro from obviously the Grid Network. Obviously, we have Emily Sharp from the Grid Network, Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, and joining us from Portland are Joe Samaniego and Nicole Fry. How's everybody doing today?
Sleepy, but happy.
Sounds good. Alrighty, well, with 3 races to go in the NTT INDYCAR season and 3 races to go before the NASCAR playoffs, the motorsports calendar is really heating up. First and foremost today, obviously, we want to thank our Patreon supporters. They'll be listed over here on the left. Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. And we'll be kicking off today's broadcast by...
I think we got a lot of excitement, and so I'm really excited to hear from Nicole live at the track with Joe as well. So, up to you guys.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is a little bit noisy over here. If you guys can hear it in the background, we have cars running on track actively, and it is definitely shaping up to be kind of a crazy weekend. The atmosphere here is very intense. We're potentially going to see a championship winner crowned here for the second time in the last 3 years. Palou definitely has the option of winning here in Portland, but he did have a little bit of a nasty crash yesterday during qualifying. He does seem to be back on track to be racing good this morning, but only time will be able to tell. The atmosphere is really good this afternoon, despite the incredible heat and everything that we're seeing at track. So it's definitely going to be an interesting race, both for drivers, teams, and fans.
And now for the Pacific Northwest, we know it's going to be extra hot for racing in Portland. Standards 110 laps, 209 miles, and the treacherous Shelton chicane at the end of the long drag strip. So Nicole, in your opinion, what are the 3 keys to having a successful race today?
So I think the first thing is just going to be tire strategy. I think no team going into this weekend was quite prepared for just how brutal this heat was going to be. And we've seen that the track is so incredibly sticky. Doing track walks earlier this week, it was just so obvious how much of an issue this could be for some teams if they're not prepared to properly manage their tires. On top of that, I do think as far as the heat is concerned, just the physicality of this race is going to be a big burden for a lot of the teams and a lot of the drivers. Mentally, racing in heat like this is exhausting, and it is going to be a real test of their endurance to see how they can handle it. And of course, the one thing that we always mention here in Portland, it is the Shelton chicane. That very first turn is absolutely brutal, and with the heat, with the emotions that are probably going to be running high, as well as just the desire to prove to have a good race this afternoon, I think it's going to be tricky for some drivers. Hopefully it is a clean first lap and we have minimal damage in that first turn, but it's something that we're going to keep very close eye on.
Yeah, Nicole, turn 1, is always really crazy on the first lap. Some years is clean, some years is really chaotic. Yeah, hopefully it'll be clean this time, for the driver's sake. But if we get a lot of chaos, there'll be a lot to talk about tonight on Grid Live Wrap Up, 90 minutes after today's NASCAR Cup Series race at Watkins Glen and the BitNow.com Grand Prix of Portland. Nicole, thank you so much for your coverage at Portland International Raceway this weekend, alongside Joe Samaniego, who we'll also be hearing from at some point, not during this show, but at some point later on. And hope you get to enjoy the races and your coverage out there.
Thank you. We'll talk to you guys later.
For sure. See you later. And now we're going to focus on the championship hunt. The main focus for many is the NTT INDYCAR Series championship battle. Alex Palou enters with that 121-point lead over Pato O'Ward. If Palou leaves with a 108-point lead, he clinches the championship, 98 points, and Palou clinches the championship, assuming he starts the next 2 races. Palou has 2 wins here, while O'Ward has 2 fourth-place finishes. Pato will be starting first after teammate Christian Lundgaard took the pole, who has a 6th-place grid penalty for an unapproved engine change. I know others have penalties as well. Alex Palou starts 5th. He made a quick lap, but went off in the final corner into the barrier, kept going, and lost his fast lap. And bringing everyone back on the screen for this. Starting you, Emily, is O'Ward in the best position possible, starting first, and Palou on the 3rd row.
Well, I'm just so excited by the way that things shook up yesterday after qualifying, Kobe. We're really going to hopefully get an interesting race in terms of the championship hunt today, especially leading up to qualifying. Pato himself was saying that the car wasn't really there in practice, and then it seemed to have come alive in qualifying, and obviously with the penalty to his teammate. Christian Lundgaard, who obviously secured P1, but will not be starting on pole. He's starting a little bit further back in the field because of that engine penalty. Pato is in a really great place. To Nicole's point, turn 1, the Shelton chicane is extremely unpredictable. It can be a little drive in the park, if you will, or absolute chaos. So with Pato being out in front, hopefully he can kind of get himself away from any trouble, just kind of have a good start, and kind of stay away from the emotions that might be riled in the back between Palou trying to make a charge, Will Power, who feels like he would be a man on a mission this weekend with all of the rumors that I know we're going to get into and talk about a little bit later in today's program. But Pato's been having a really great season. He's finished all within the top 10, but 2 races so far. So I think this is going to be a really fun and interesting storyline that's going to develop throughout today's race. Palou's going to be desperate to get some overtaking done so he can clinch his championship. But I don't know. Palou's pretty methodical, and he doesn't really drive emotionally. So I think we're in store for a really interesting lap 1, but obviously 110 laps as well.
Yeah, I think that coming into this weekend, Pato O'Ward knew that he needed to do everything he could possibly do to at least try to contend for this IndyCar title this season, even if the odds are relatively stacked against him. But with that said, Pato O'Ward definitely lobbed a great qualifying effort, putting his number 5 Papaya Orange Aero McLaren on the pole. And I think that as far as keeping his championship hopes alive, I think that he did the best that he possibly could do by obviously keeping himself out of the mid-pack, where he would have to contend with a bunch of other hungry drivers and possibly find himself into an accident. With that said, Alex Palou obviously had that accident in qualifying. You can tell he's definitely pushing it to the limit every single lap of his weekend, and he obviously wants to get that 9th and 10th win this season. And considering his record here at the past, I don't see why he can't contend with O'Ward for the victory today. But as far as Pato is concerned, I think he did everything possible to put himself in a good position to continue to contend for this title, assuming he goes out and performs today. But it'll be a tall effort to keep not only Alex Palou behind him and the rest of the NTT IndyCar field, but his hungry teammate Christian Lundgaard as well.
Yeah, for me, guys, I mean, is O'Ward, Pato, is he in the best possible position to start? Yeah, I mean, he couldn't get any better, right? However, the thing is with Palou being on the 3rd row, I think if Palou is anywhere remotely close to you, you should be worried, just the way it's gone this season. And if I remember correctly, when Palou won this event a couple years ago, he started 5th, and that's where he's starting again today. So O'Ward absolutely in the best position possible. I'm certain he can get it done. I know he hasn't won here yet, but he's more than capable. He's had a tremendous season, and I think we would appreciate O'Ward's season more if Palou wasn't just putting belt to butt every single weekend, even on his bad weekends. So very happy for O'Ward to be able to do what he's done this season, and he's going to ultimately, I think, finish 2nd, regardless of what happens these next couple weeks. Obviously, as you can see next to me, so I'd have to point that way. He's the only other person in mathematical contention besides Alex Palou. So, yeah, I think O'Ward's in this best possible position as starting first. For Palou, he's got to be a little worried though. Palou was fastest in final practice. Palou's usually the fastest everywhere we go, it seems like. So, yeah, I hate to say it, but he probably has to hope Palou doesn't have a Alex Palou type of day. But you know how if you hope that happens, then usually it doesn't. So ultimately, we're going to see what happens here at Portland. Very excited. We got live coverage too, live reporting, I should say.
Yes, for sure. Matthew is always excited when great networks at the racetrack. I feel like we don't get to the track enough. So hopefully in 2026, we can send more of our people to the track. And we definitely have to thank once again our wonderful Patreon investors and everyone who sends us, the buy me a coffees and the YouTube super chats as well, because every little amount helps us be able to do this, because without you, Joe and Nicole would not be at the track this weekend. So once again, big thank you to you all. And getting back to the IndyCar stuff, Pato O'Ward, obviously when you're starting at the very front of the field, that's the best place where you can start, because as Nicole alluded to, at the very start, that turn one is really crazy and insane, and if you're ahead of the chaos, you're going to be good. And even where Alex Palou starting in fifth on the third row, you could still potentially get yourself into trouble. So Palou needs to make sure he gets through the first few sets of corners without issues, and he should be smooth sailing throughout the race. But I definitely would rather be in Pato O'Ward's position right now, where I can, get out front, get that clean air, and just march down the road to try to avoid all of the issues there in the Shelton chicane. And in Mid-Ohio, Palou had a wind in hand, but it slipped away with a mistake. And then yesterday at Portland, a track where he has two wins, he set a quick lap, and then he made a mistake. I said, for some reason, it just seems like Alex Palou is, just making, quite a few mistakes in the second half of the season. The first half of the season, almost flawless. And then once we got, into the summer stretch, we started knowing some cracks. And Alex Palou, and start me on this one, Tanner, are you surprised by Palou's mistakes, especially, when they look flawless on Friday and earlier Saturday?
I was a bit surprised by Palou. Obviously, we're used to him looking like he did on, Friday, where, he is all flawless and, looks to be the fastest guy out there. I mean, we've seen it 8 times this season through 14 events. So, this is the Alex Palou that we're used to. But, yeah, now that you mention it, that Mid-Ohio mistake where he, got loose going into I believe it was the 9th turn there with 5 laps to go with a very hefty lead over teammate Scott Dixon, and let that race get away from him because he ended up running off course. I don't think that Palou is really in a position where he's going to be threatening his ability to win the title by pushing this weekend. But at the same time, you also want to finish the race, get the championship locked up and all that. But it doesn't seem to be that that's what he's aiming for today. In my opinion, it certainly looks like he is aiming to get that 10th win of the season, and he's obviously got to get the 9th one first. And that starts this weekend at a track that he knows very well how to get around, a track that he's won at twice before. And I think that in an attempt to, further establish his dominance this season, it just got away from him yesterday. But obviously was able to bounce back, get into the Fast Six, and qualify 5th. So I see no reason to believe that Alex Palou is going to have any sort of issues today. And I just think that yesterday's mistake was more so an outlier than a trend of any sort.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tanner. I don't think that he's at risk of losing championship altogether. However, as a IndyCar fan, I would love to see this battle continue beyond this weekend. Although I'm sure Joe and Nicole would love for this thing to get wrapped up because it'd be so exciting. Palou winning the championship for our team, but not much more to add to what you've said, Tanner. He kind of been, up until this year's Indy 500, of course, known as being stronger as on the road and street courses. So yeah, between a few mistakes this weekend, and obviously in Ohio, very surprising to see from him. He is very, not only is he securing, top speeds and being the fastest on track, that's putting him in these positions to be our championship leader with such a gap between him and Pato, but he's very mathematical and methodical about it. When he's not winning, he's still, increasing his championship lead by being in top finishing positions. But I do want to say, if we look at last year, and obviously the schedule rolls out, he is going to, after this weekend, which is obviously what he did last year too, the Milwaukee Mile, which is an oval, and then finishing in Nashville as well. So again, up until this year, ovals were not his strength. And so it was really neck and neck between him and Power last year. I mean, with Power being taken out of the race, that was really the only moment that he was able to comfortably breathe of securing his championship. So all this goes to say, to go back to your original question, Kobe, the mistakes can eventually catch up to him. I do think he's run away with the season more significantly than he did last year, but the little mistakes here and there, depending on how much of an impact and significant they are, they can catch up to him. So he is human. He's not completely just, there's no hope at all for Pato to catch him. But I do think the odds are stacked against Pato, and I do think that Palou will be our championship winner by the end of the season. But again, the little mistakes, surprising, but can eventually lead to an impactful place to his hunt for his other championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, like Emily just said, he is human. Sometimes it feels like he's not, just what he's been able to do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really surprise me that he has made some mistakes, because for a guy like him, it's great to make them now when you are so far ahead. I think sometimes you get almost too far ahead to the point where then you start slacking a little bit. And it's great that he's in a position where he can make a lot of mistakes these next couple race weekends, and he could really still be in the fight. But good news for Nicole and Joe. I think it's over. I think he will be able to make as many mistakes as he wants going these next couple weeks. But for today, I really think it's when you're the second fastest in the first practice, second fastest in the second practice, fastest in final practice, I think you have speed. And when you are arguably the greatest driver in the world right now, I think I wouldn't bet against him. Feels like Verstappen a couple years ago, where Verstappen could start 20th, and I think I was still confident he would be a podium finisher. That's how I feel about Palou this season, as well as SVG back in 2022. Same way. So for him, not surprised by the mistakes. He hasn't been flawless, but he's just been so good. Even his bad days are a lot of drivers' best days. So yeah, I'm not surprised by it, but it is Alex Palou we're talking about, who is undisputably in the top 3 motorsports drivers right now in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think you can argue that at all, that Alex Palou isn't one of the top drivers in the world right now, because he's just had quite a marvelous historic season, and it would be very fitting for him to, go out and clinch that championship this weekend. The next race in Milwaukee, or, obviously the season finale in Nashville. And Matthew, you listed the speed that Palou has this weekend, been really quick in practice, and who knows what would have happened if he was able to complete his qualifying run there. Maybe he would be starting the front row alongside Pato, maybe he was second, maybe on the pole. But I do think, given the speed that Palou has, I don't know if he wins today. He certainly could, but I think a podium at the very least is in store for him in that number 10 team. But despite some of the mistakes we've seen from him in the second half of the season, still one of the very best. And I would not be surprised to see another flawless day from him today at Portland. And the task for Palou is very simple: finish ahead of O'Ward to clinch the championship. That's literally, really all he really needs to do. And O'Ward needs to gain 14 points on Palou to keep the championship battle alive. So the best thing Pato O'Ward can do, he just needs to win out, which in this competitive series is going to be extremely hard to do. Matthew, does Pato keep the championship alive, or do you think it's going to end today?
I think it's pullover. It is. I can't really say anything else. I think Pato would, if anyone in the field had a chance to beat Palou today, I think it would be him. But yeah, I really think it's pullover. I think that's a funny word. That's why I said it multiple times. But yeah, I can't really say anything else. I'm gonna be short and sweet about it. I think Palou's got it in the bag. I really do, and because his bad days have been the rest of the grid's best days, it seems like. So yeah, that's all I got for that one. I think it's over today. I think Nicole and Joe are gonna be interviewing a 3-time IndyCar champion by the end of today.
I think what you mean, actually, Matthew, is a 4-time IndyCar champion. As Alex Palou, I do think, to quote his comment about IndyCar playoffs being possibly added, no, as to Pato O'Ward's chances to win the championship this year. I think that Pato will do well to obviously probably contend and maybe even win this race, which will help propel him into next season. But I think that Alex Palou is going to do just enough to make sure that those 14 points are insurmountable and obviously close the gap so much that as long as he starts the next 2 races, he should come out the NTT IndyCar champion for 2025 to cap off a 3 consecutive championship run. And he's going to go for 4 next year, and we have no signs of seeing a driver less than 30 slow down. So I think that, as Matthew so eloquently put it, I believe after today the championship will be pullover.
It is funny. That's what I keep saying it, Matthew. I laugh every time someone says it. So as a I'm gonna go against my colleagues here. I think it's pullover for the season. I think Alex Palou will be our championship, a 4-time champion, IndyCar championship season. But I would, purely just as a fan who would love to see a battle continue and not for the battle for second place in the championship ranking. I did the math very early my time this morning, and if Pato finished first and Palou finished third, the hunt or Pato's chances are still intact that he can take it the next race to the Milwaukee Mile and still be fighting for it. I don't think Pato is going to be our champ of the season, but I want to continue to keep things interesting because I think it's way more fun to get invested in something when you're going head to head for a championship versus the second place finisher in the championship. And Pato has really had a turning point, I think, this season. He's finished 5 times on the podium. He's finished his highest finish ever at Toronto, which he has been very outspoken about being one of his worst races on the schedule for him, and he's had some really great breakthrough moments. And while I think obviously winning here in the past for Alex Palou will obviously be to his benefit, I don't know. I think the full moon or the vibes of it all, I think we're going to take this to the Milwaukee Mile and just continue to make things interesting. So I don't know if I'm purposely just trying to be against my colleagues, but I'm all for keeping things interesting and through the rest of the season.
And actually, Emily, I'm actually going to side with you on this one. I think the championship is going to continue to move on to the Milwaukee Mile, but I think by then it's going to be over. But because I think Pato O'Ward will finish ahead of Alex Palou today, and maybe I'm tipping off my pick a winner there. But yeah, I certainly think we've seen a different Pato O'Ward this year, and also think that Aaron McLaren is doing a much better job giving him a car that can go out there and contend. The last few years or so, he hasn't had the car under him to go out there and make those moves. And also we've seen Pato improve as a driver as well, like he was able to do at Toronto before, that race. He was like talking about how this is his worst track in IndyCar, and Toronto wasn't one of his favorite. And then he goes out there, and gives Zach Brown a win, his first, the McLaren CEO's first win in person as an IndyCar team owner. So it shows that Pato has really stepped up his game, worked on his weaknesses as a driver. While I think O'Ward is definitely going to finish ahead of Palou today, I still think at the end of the day, like you guys said, it's certainly going to be Pullover, and we're going to see Alex Palou, the IndyCar champion, at the end of the day. Because in order for Pato O'Ward to be able to have any realistic shot at this championship, he's going to need Palou to have a historic collapse his last 3 races. So basically, Palou would probably need to DNF at Portland, Milwaukee, and Nashville and score last place points while Pato is out there winning all 3 races. And the chances of that happening realistically are extremely slim at this point. And one of the talking points of the weekend, been team, and not just this weekend, all season long, is Team Penske, because 3 races ago, and to everyone's surprise, Team Penske still has not won a race this year. Maybe you're not looking at them this weekend at Portland, but definitely those 2 ovals, Milwaukee, Nashville, it definitely feels like Team Penske might be one of the threats to win there, especially with Joseph Newgarden, Matthew.
Yeah, Team Penske being winless, I don't think any of us thought at the start of the season we'd be having a conversation like that. But this is the 31st race at Portland, and of course, since IndyCar returned to Portland, it has been to second to last race of the season. However, now it's the third to last race of the season, so that's funny. 2 ovals coming up to finish the season. Penske is notoriously known for being great on ovals with their drivers. But even here, when you think about it, Team Penske has had 2 of the past winners with Scott McLaughlin back in 2022, and Will Power has 2 wins here if you include last year as well. And then plus Joseph Newgarden, who has had a very interesting season, to say the least. He's finished on the podium here last year, but he, just like his Penske teammates, still haven't won. However, he could have won, but then obviously that incident that took him out when he was dominating, I can't think of where it was off the top of my head, but yeah, we'll get there. I'll let you guys figure that out. But McLaughlin this race didn't make the Fast 12. Newgarden didn't make the Fast 6, and Will Power is the highest starting driver. This seems to be a great track for Power. So I'm going to throw it back over to you, Kobe. Which Team Penske driver do you think is most likely to claim a victory here today?
Can I choose none? But you're asking which Team Penske driver. Matthew, I think the track you're talking about is Gateway, where Newgarden was dominating, and then ended up upside down after colliding with Louis Foster in that debacle where they should have thrown the caution a tad bit sooner. But that's a discussion we already had on a different day. So I'll get to today's discussion. If I had to pick one Team Penske driver who has the highest chance to win today, I'd probably think it would be Will Power. And I know we'll talk about Will Power in a minute, but in these races, track position is really important. And since he has the best track position at the moment, I certainly think you go for him. And Scott McLaughlin, he's been really quick here, in Portland in the past. I believe he has a victory in the Grand Prix of Portland, and it's been a really weird weekend for him. But I certainly expected to see more from Scott McLaughlin. We'll also talk about Scott McLaughlin as well, because he was involved in in an incident in practice. Got people talking, potentially reigniting an old rivalry from the Thermal Club this season. But yeah, it certainly hasn't been the season Team Penske has wanted. It doesn't look like they're one of the favorites to win this weekend. But if they are to get somehow win this race with either Power, Newgarden, or McLaughlin, this would be a huge weight lifted off their shoulders because of the difficult year that they've had. They just haven't been able to find the top step of the podium. They've had speed, at times, but if it wasn't for mechanical failures, crashes, bad luck, just a whole bunch of circumstances that have been preventing Team Penske from going to victory lane this season. They still have 3 races. Doesn't look like it's going to happen today, but with Milwaukee and Nashville coming up, I will feel really good about where Team Penske is, because their oval package is extremely strong.
So, Kobe, if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like you're saying 2025, it's pullover for Penske, right? Yeah, I don't
Almost.
think much more to add to. We do have 2 ovals. I do agree with you. Those are usually where they're stronger, but it's probably a pullover for them this weekend. I don't have too much more to add than what you've covered, Kobe. I agree with you. We're aligned today with our picks and our thoughts going into today's race. I think if anybody is going to have a chance, which I don't think it's going to be Penske's weekend, but I would love to see them have a better weekend where it's not them being taken out and cars flipping and engine problems and seatbelt problems. I think the best chance of the 3 drivers would be Will Power, because as you said, track position is everything. There's curves and straightaways. So unless we find someone out there with a man on a mission to overtaking corners, which would be fun to see. I do think that Will Power stands the best of his teammates to finish higher up in the field. And I know we're about to talk about it, but he has to feel like he has somewhat of a chip on his shoulder to silence some of these rumors going around. So I think if he was able to put together a strong weekend, hopefully that would help kind of silence some of the rumors going around with where he's going to land next year.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Will Power is definitely feeling a bit of the pressure coming with not having a contract for next year as of yet. That is public knowledge, at least. I will say the Power of the three Penske cars probably has the best shot to win this weekend, considering his Row 2 start. But also, I feel like I've seen him just have stronger runs here in the more recent past. Not only that, he seems to be, of the three Penske drivers, the one that has really acclimated the most to this hybrid era, and especially at the road courses. I do feel at the ovals, Joseph Newgarden is still unparalleled in this series at running those, but this week, if we're talking about which driver of the Team Penske trio has the best chance to win, I think their best hope lies within Will Power. I think that he has a bit of a wild streak in him, and I think that remembering how everything ended at Toronto, I think that if it requires getting his elbows out, I think if Will Power has to race to the lead with Pato O'Ward, he might be a little bit more liberal with moving him off the race course if he needs to. So I think that Will Power definitely stands the best chance today, but I wouldn't sleep on Joseph Newgarden. Obviously, he has a relatively solid starting position, and he might be able to take advantage of that with some good strategy.
Yeah, and for me, I agree with all three of you. I think it's Will Power. I that's all I got to really add to that one. I think you guys pretty much hit on it. Not to waste any time, but on Thursday, we did learn that Will Power still does not have a seat secured for 2026. And we did talk to him, not us specifically, but our people out in Portland International Raceway. And he did say he still loves to do it. So hopefully, wishing him the best, he can find a ride. And Will Power and David Malukas both made the Fast Six. Obviously, like Emily alluded to, there are rumors about who would take over. He might be one of those guys. So I'm going to throw this question over to Emily. If Will Power does win this race, does that secure a seat for him in the 12 next season, or do you think he's already long gone from Penske?
Can you guys tell that I've been wanting to talk about this since the beginning of the program? I feel like this could be a whole discussion to be had, and really spend like a whole 30 minutes just talking about like what is going to happen to Will Power. And there's obviously been a lot of discourse online about, with everything that he's accomplished as a driver in the series over his long tenure with, the IndyCar Series. He doesn't deserve, this is the discourse being said online, that he doesn't deserve this type of treatment where he is down to, after this weekend, 2 more races to go in the series, still not knowing what his fate will be, especially with Penske, where he's accomplished so much over the years. That all goes to say, to answer your question, Matthew, to be brutally honest, I don't think if he wins this weekend, he's automatically going to walk in, have a conversation with Roger and go, okay, here's, 2 more years, or here's, 4 more years, or whatever that number is. I think this really is going to be decided after the season is over. And the only thing I can say that I think is going for him in a twisted way is that all of the Penske drivers have struggled this season. So it's not like he's been glaringly standing out against Joseph Newgarden and Scotty Mack. But at the end of the day, and I know I'm always the person to like bring this point to the table, at the end of the day, motorsports is a business, and Little Dave, which has been the name that's been thrown around these, replacement of Power rumors since really the beginning of the season. Little Dave Malukas, he is the new generation, and unfortunately, what happens in sports settings is they look at the more seasoned athlete and they look at this, hot new talent, and they start evaluating what's the longevity of that new athlete versus the one who maybe has like 2 more years under him, or however many years. I personally think Will Power can continue driving for like at least 5 more years, but I'm not in the Penske boardrooms making those decisions. So to answer very long-winded, if Power wins, which I think is a big if, I still don't think he gets a contract until at the end of this season. And even at that point, I don't know. I don't think it's like locked in for Will Power, which is sad to say because he's accomplished so much. He's a champion in the series. He's an Indy 500 winner. He's done so much for Penske. So yeah, we're definitely going to be following. We're definitely going to be covering it here on the Grid Network. And really interested to hear what you have to say about it.
Personally, I think as drivers continue to, reach a bit more of an advanced age than what we're used to and still staying competitive. Obviously, you look at Scott Dixon, a recent winner at Mid-Ohio. You look at someone like Denny Hamlin in the NASCAR Cup Series, and then prior to his retirement, Kevin Harvick in the NASCAR Cup Series as well. You definitely see drivers now kind of extending that, driver lifetime that you usually see them reach before, hitting retirement. And I don't think Will Power is quite done yet. I think that he has plenty left in the tank. And I feel that a win this weekend would honestly be more validation for him than anything, because I've been feeling all along that he'll be back at Penske next season. But I think what a win could net him here is possibly getting that 2-year deal that he likely wants. I feel like what has been stalling these negotiations between Team Penske and Will Power has been a desire for Power to have a bit more job security. Having a 2-year deal rather than a 1-and-1 would definitely be something that would be a bit more appealing to a driver who is, probably hitting one of their last contracts, so to speak. I don't think that Power has, 3 to 5 years left in him. I think he probably only has 1 to 2 more seasons left in the tank. But in my opinion, that's still plenty for a guy that only won a title less than 3 years ago. So I feel that Will Power, having contended for a title last season, and, honestly, had he not had that seatbelt malfunction in Nashville, it's entirely possible he could have gone out and won, because Alex Palou had a very milquetoast run last year at Nashville. I just feel that Will Power winning this weekend would be more of a morale boost for him in the 12 team going into next year, and a big boost for Team Penske as a whole, considering they've gone winless this year. So while I think that Power winning this weekend won't really matter too much to what his 2026 plans are, I think that they could get him that second year on a next contract rather than getting stuck with a 1 year next year.
Yeah, that's certainly a great point, Tanner, about wanting more job security and a multi-year deal, and someone of Will Power's talent. I feel like he has earned it, especially, in his mid-40s now. He's continuing to age like fine wine, as you mentioned, just like Denny Hamlin, as we've seen in the Cup Series, define father time, and the likes of Scott Dixon and Will Power in IndyCar, they're doing the exact same thing. And even in a down year for Team Penske, Will Power's still been, the best Penske driver this year. And it shows that he's not slowing down. He's not washed up or anything like that, that he can still go out there. If Team Penske had a better IndyCar program this year, I think we would see Will Power, up there fighting for wins week in and week out, because he still has it. But, as time goes on, we get this youth movement coming along in motorsports, and then despite, the older driver, still been talented, they still want to move on, to someone younger. And I do understand that, but at the same time, Will Power is still driving at a high level. It's not like he's outside of the top 20 in points right now, struggling in a top tier car. If Will Power's outside the top 20 in points right now, just struggling really badly, I would understand getting rid of him at the end of the season, replacing him with someone younger like David Malukas, who's interestingly been sponsored by Gallagher Insurance this weekend, which is a Team Penske sponsor. I don't know if we should read anything into that. But if Will Power were to win this race at Milwaukee or Nashville, sadly, I don't believe that's going to change anything with his contract situation. And I remember at the very beginning of this season when we did our grid roundtable, our IndyCar prediction show, I said my biggest bold prediction that this would be Will Power's last year at Team Penske, and everyone looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm gonna stand by that. As much as I respect Will Power, everything he's done his whole career at Team Penske. Over 40 race wins, over 60 poles, the all-time, best qualifier in IndyCar history, over 100 podium finishes. We've seen this happen with Penske before. We all know, obviously, Juan Pablo Montoya, after he finished his career in NASCAR, went back to IndyCar for another stint, did extremely well. Montoya was still performing at a high level, but they loved the young hot gun at the time. It was Joseph Newgarden. And they moved on from Juan Pablo Montoya, Elio Castroneves, who admittedly, fallen off a bit towards the end of his full-time tenure in IndyCar as a Penske driver. Elio begged to stay full-time in IndyCar, but, Roger's like, nope, we're moving on from you. And then they moved on from Simon Pagenaud as well. So it's not out of the question for Team Penske to move on from its high-profile drivers. And I hate to say it, but I really fear that Will Power is going to be the next Team Penske driver who's accomplished a lot for the captain to be moved out of the seat. And it would be such a shame. And, it was Will Power, honestly, in his interviews this weekend leading up to the race, looked really helpless. He said, I just want to know, because he wants to know what the situation is, because I believe his negotiating period with other teams opens up on August 31st. At the very end of the month, that's when he'll be able to, start talking to teams for next year. So he can't really, explore other options right now until he knows what Team Penske is going to do. And there's also a chance he may not even find out what they're going to do until after Nashville, the season finale. And we all know how that worked out for Rinus VeeKay last year, really late in the game, hard to find something. But I do think that, other teams, if Will Power's let go, that they will be interested in his service. And on Racer.com, Marshall Pruitt posted an update on, the silly season, which has been really quiet. He basically said that Will Power is the key to silly season, because the Will Power is available, although other drivers are, most of the drivers on the grid are under contract for next year. It's kind of strange. IndyCar is silly season, kind of like NASCAR, because almost everyone's under contract, and the only way you can move on is buying out a contract, moving someone on like that. And it seems like based on Marshall's reporting, there's a lot of teams, if Will Power is available, they'd be willing to sack one of their drivers for him.
It's funny you mentioned. It reminds me kind of last year. I feel like Carlos Sainz almost dictated most of Formula One silly season when Lewis Hamilton obviously went over the Ferrari, and then they were all like, "Well, we're just waiting on Carlos Sainz to figure out what he's going to do," and then all the seats fell in line. And it's hard to find a direct comparison, I feel, with Will Power. You can say he's kind of like, I can't say he's the Kyle Busch of Penske or the Jimmy Johnson, but what I'm getting at is a guy who's been so good, who has been one of the best drivers for the specific team in their history, and then spend most of their career with that specific team. And then at the end of their career, kind of leaving. I don't know if you can do a direct comparison, but it does feel kind of weird to say that it is possible Will Power will not be a Penske driver. And when you think about it, he's only had one season in his career. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not as familiar with IndyCar as you guys. But he's only had one season in his career where he didn't get a victory, and that came off the season following a championship run, or season after his championship run. So I think he still got it. He had 3 wins last year. I think if your Team Penske seems like a lot's going on in general with them and their motorsports organizations, I think if you're them, you owe it to him that if you want to rebuild and kind of figure out what the heck is going wrong with your program, I think you need to have a guy like Will Power there. And I think more of this dispute is the length of a contract, I feel like, versus the actual contract. I feel like it's something like Tanner had mentioned. I think Will Power might want 1 or 2 to 3 years maybe, but I think Penske would be only willing to do like a 1-year type deal. And it reminds me of the same as NASCAR. It's like you've had guys like Daniel Suarez. We said at the beginning of the year he needed the win unless he wanted Zilich to come up and replace him. But then you realize that Suarez was almost gone before the start of the year with everything going on with ownership changes and stuff. And then Harrison Burton last year seemed like same thing, needed a win, got a win, still out the door. So it's just to bring NASCAR into it in that sense. But yeah, Penske has been just quite a disappointing team. I mean, that's really the best way to describe it. And the season's just been disappointing. This is actually the first time ever since Chevrolet joined IndyCar back in 2012 that a Penske driver hasn't led being like the number one Chevy driver in the final point standings. They've done it every single season, and they won't this year because obviously it's going to be Pato O'Ward with McLaren. And so in 2020, Pato O'Ward almost had it, but he lost second place to Joseph Newgarden in the final race at Long Beach. This year, obviously, that's not going to happen as Pato O'Ward is 180 points ahead of Will Power, which is insane to think about, considering Will Power was in championship contention just a few years ago. But Pato could seal it for McLaren, having one of their drivers be the top Chevy in the standings. Christian Lundgaard, like Tanner had mentioned before, he's fifth in the standings. He's had a tremendous season, and Power is still only down in ninth, and he is the only Penske driver in the top 10, which, again, crazy to think about. So my first question, I'm going to throw this one over to Tanner. How significant is it for McLaren to outscore Team Penske? And for the first time, Penske not having the highest Chevy driver in the standings at the end of the season?
I think you're muted, Tanner.
Great catch, everybody. I believe, to start out with Arrow McLaren, I think that this is a massive deal for them to not only be contending so well in the points and have a somewhat outside legitimate shot at winning this title after the absolutely dominant season that Alex Palou has put up. I just feel that Arrow McLaren has been probably the strongest Chevy team all season, so I'm glad that the points seem to reflect that. Earlier in the year, I felt that Christian Lundgaard obviously put on some incredible performances, being, within eyeshot of Alex Palou and his wins. Obviously gaining multiple podiums prior to the Indy 500, but since then he's kind of slipped off the radar a little bit into the lower half of the top 10 most of the time. Whereas Pato O'Ward definitely took that Indy 500 run that he had and has made the most of it and taken that momentum into the second half of the season to score victories at both Iowa and at Toronto. And I just feel that this team has been building ever since the McLaren side started entering the fray at the beginning of the decade. And this is just the culmination of that. And, obviously they had some growing pains and some contractual disputes that I think hindered the development of that team. But now that they have a pretty solid core of three younger drivers that are all showing, really solid pace and really flashing, I think that, them pulling ahead of Penske just makes sense at this point in time. I mean, you have three seasoned drivers over at Team Penske. I know that Scott McLaughlin isn't seasoned in IndyCar circles necessarily, but seasoned in the way that he has been a racer for many years and had a process that he had to follow. And then obviously everything changed once the hybrid unit got put into the vehicle. So I think that having three younger drivers that were a bit more malleable and a bit more adaptable to this hybrid unit being added to the vehicles, I think gave McLaren a bit of a step up. So I feel that overall it's a really big deal for McLaren, less of a big deal for Penske, as it seems that their drivers are for the most part starting to acclimate to hybrid. But at the same time, you've really got to be, beaming if you're wearing papaya orange. The season for them has been relatively amazing to this point. It's just that it's not going to end in championship champagne like they would prefer, and they'll probably have to settle for second and likely a top 5 points finish for their top two drivers. And, Nolan Siegel, I think, has also made some very significant strides this season. So I think the future is bright for Arrow McLaren going forward. And I mean, this is only year one of Christian Lundgaard with that team. So I think that he will have an even stronger year too. But Penske better watch their back. I know they'll come back stronger next year after a very unfortunate 2025 season to this point. But I think the McLaren's here to stay as far as contending is concerned.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Tanner. I certainly think that McLaren is here to stay for the foreseeable future. And I think that's some pretty significant bragging rights for them to be like, hey, we're the top Chevy team. After it's been Team Penske for so many years, we finally knocked them, off the top of the mountain and in this aspect. So it shows, the work that McLaren has put into this IndyCar program. No, we've seen, musical chairs with that number 6 car that Nolan Siegel currently has, also on the personnel side. But it really seems like that they're really starting, to put everything together. Yeah, we'd love to see Nolan Siegel, finish the year strong. I know he's had some ups and downs this year. I even said I've seen growth from him this year compared to last year. So hopefully, with him getting another year in that seat, that he can continue to grow and live up to the standards of being a McLaren driver. And you make up a good point about Christian Lundgaard. I think he's been really good this year on the road and the street course. I still think that his Achilles heel are, kind of like Alex Palou, are the oval tracks, because Christian Lundgaard, I felt like the RLO car that he was previously in held him back on the oval, since we know how RLO's oval program usually goes. But, then you put him in the McLaren, I think it just shows, how strong Pato O'Ward is on the oval. It shows that Christian still has a lot to learn on the oval. So hopefully he'll work on that over the offseason and become a better oval racer, just like Palou did. And then Pato O'Ward's just been really impressive. Once again, I do think at some point in his career, he is going to be an IndyCar champion and also an Indy 500 champion. I think it's not a matter if, it's just a matter of when. And he's certainly, McLaren's number one driver in the IndyCar Series, and he's been leading the charge. And I think McLaren has a lot to be proud of this season. Although I believe that they're going to come up short in the drivers' championship to Alex Palou, and it's certainly going to be interesting to see how McLaren, is going to maintain this level, in the next few years. And I think in order, stay up there with Alex Palou and Chip Ganassi racing, McLaren, despite, the good year they're having with that number 5 team, they're going to need to continue to step it up and maintain over the years ahead. But it's really good to be a McLaren driver in the year 2025, because things are going well right now in IndyCar, especially Pato O'Ward, and then also in Formula One with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in the 2-man race for the F1 World Championship. So lots of smiles right now if you're wearing papaya colors.
I think that you're a papaya fan yourself, because, like you said, between Arrow McLaren and then McLaren F1, they're having a great season. I do want to just bring up that last year, the championship, and like cut out there for a little bit, so I have no problem continue yapping through internet delays. Sorry about that. I'll keep it. I think it's significant championship fight when they were part of it last year, and the top finishing Chevys obviously are going to be Pato, and then to your point, Tanner, Christian Lundgaard has had a great season. He's currently P5 in the championship, and then just to make this a full circle moment, the next top finishing Chevy in the championship hunt, Will Power in P9, followed by Lil Dave Malukas in P10. So there you go. There's the breakdown of the top Chevy performers. I think Lundgaard has a chance to even break into the top 3, but he has to get past Scott Dixon and Kyle Kirkwood, who obviously were race winners this season, but we're heading into an oval. So not necessarily a strong suit for Lundgaard. So I think great things to come for Arrow McLaren. They've only been collaborating with Arrow and Sam Schmidt for 5 seasons now. So to have 2 of their drivers really knocking on the door for this championship, they are just making incredible strides and definitely going in the right direction. So hopefully Zach Brown feels like his partnership is being well spent here in IndyCar coming back to the series.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think it's quite significant. I'll be quick with my answer. For McLaren to have such a quick turnaround in motorsport, I feel the last couple of years prior, I'm not going to say they were slacking, but I don't think they were doing as great as they usually do. But for them to be able to come to IndyCar, which they've been in IndyCar, obviously, but be the top performing Chevrolet in IndyCar, which has never happened for them, and then for in Formula One, like what was mentioned as well, Piastri and Lando Norris just kicking everyone's butt. Both of them have just been incredible this season too. But yeah, that's we talked a lot about the guys P1 through P9, but I'm going to throw it over to Kobe. Let's take a look at the people from outside the top 10.
And before we get to that, Matthew, I actually want to catch up on the chat room. I apologize for not getting to that sooner. I'm not used to running this great live camera set, so I've been mostly trying to focus on operating the cameras and the graphics and all of that jazz. So apologies to the viewers watching at home. We'll catch up on some of the comments now. Adam Lemery says he thinks that Alex Palou does wrap up the 2025 IndyCar Championship today. And Scott says, yes, it's mental for real. Do you mean mental there about the terms of the championship battle? I think that's what you mean, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then Adam also says he thinks that Will Power does come back to Penske in 2026. So much respect. Yeah, I have much respect for Will Power as well. But the question is, does Roger Penske respect Will Power in return, have enough dignity to bring him back, given all he's done for the organization? But as we know, business happens, and unfortunately, you don't always get what you want to see in those situations. And you also said, Adam, Pato O'Ward time is near regarding being an IndyCar champion. You say in the next 2 to 3 years it'll happen. Yeah, I think that's certainly a reasonable timeline for Pato O'Ward to get an IndyCar championship or even an Indy 500 win, since it seems like he's always so close year in and year out to getting that done. And now winning from outside the top 10 is not impossible, but it's also not easy. In all the IndyCar races at Portland, only twice the winner has come from outside the top 10, and that was in 1997. In 2018, Scott McLaughlin is starting 13th and was very frustrated with Devlin DeFrancesco after he felt Devlin held him up in the Sheldon Chicane. And as McLaughlin ended up passing DeFrancesco, he displayed the middle finger on the way by him. As you remember, way back in the spring, early in the season at the Thermal Club, they had an issue and they got into a shouting match. After an issues they had early on in the season. So I guess we go back to Indy rivals that they used to have way back in the day when they used to market, the different rivalries in the IndyCar series. So definitely no love lost between Devlin and DeFrancesco even this many months later. So Emily, do you think Scott McLaughlin overreacted in that situation, and do you think the way he reacted, is just the frustration related to the type of year he's having?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Kobe. I think overall he's had like all of the Penske drivers, they've had pretty frustrating seasons. Obviously, Scotty Mack had that very devastating pre-lap, warm-up lap incident happened to him at this 500 earlier in May. So there was that, and then obviously, as you've said, Devlin DeFrancesco seems to be a thorn that just keeps popping up at the wrong place at the wrong time for Scott McLaughlin this season. And then don't forget, he also had that incident in Iowa as well, where they kind of got into it as well. So Devlin just likes to be around Scotty Mack for some reason. And I do want to say, I find it very hard to answer questions and say that these athletes are overreacting just because they're in, very intense scenario. I mean, I'm a figure skater, and my sport, it's nowhere on the same level of emotion, danger, adrenaline as these guys who are getting into cars going over 200 miles per hour. So I usually side with the driver that their emotions are valid, because if someone is doing dangerous, it's not just, putting their own lives at risk. It's putting, in this instance, Scotty Mack's, performance and safety at risk too. So I think his emotion was valid. Francesco, his spotter was kind of doing him wrong with him coming out the way that he did out of the pit lane. So I think that he was at fault. I do think that he was also at fault for thermal as well, and still owe an apology to Scott McLaughlin for now 2 of those incidents. So I don't think it was an overreaction, but I do think that DeFrancesco was in the wrong, to be bold with my feelings. I think he was in the wrong for now the second time with those 2 kind of being caught up in it.
Yeah, I think if you're to quote Daniel Ricciardo, a high performance athlete, I'm not going to do the key part. But yeah, I think when you have a year that is nowhere near what you're capable of, I think we've all mentioned, I think Scott McLaughlin is really a top 10 driver in the world. He's probably in the top 5 just but what he's been able to accomplish and what he can do. I think if you put Scott McLaughlin in a stock car like in NASCAR and you give him the SVG treatment, I think he's winning just like SVG. I really do. So he's a great driver. So, yeah, I think if you're frustrated, it could be because of the year he's having. It could just be his past history with Delvin. So, yeah, that's really all I can add to that. I think Emily made some great points there. It's just you get mad, and then the season's coming to an end, and that's really that. So that's all I got for that one.
As Emily so eloquently put it, it just seems that Devlin DeFrancesco appears to just be a reoccurring sore in, Scott McLaughlin's side. And I can't really help but sympathize with him. I feel that DeFrancesco's second attempt at getting into and staying in the IndyCar Series has been just as painful as the first one. And I feel that, unfortunately, McLaughlin has been the victim of many of Devlin's mistakes. And I don't think that McLaughlin has grown accustomed to that in any way. And I don't think that he is very happy with it. And frankly, I felt that him flipping DeFrancesco off was pretty mild, all things considered, after he's had 3 races now ruined by DeFrancesco. And I just feel that at this point, I don't know why we keep, bringing some drivers into the sport when they don't really prove that they have what it takes to compete at this level. And I think that Scott McLaughlin, who, as Matthew put it, is at minimum a top 10 driver in the world overall, it's certainly frustrating to be taken out by a guy who clearly shows week in and week out that he really doesn't belong at this level of open wheel racing in America. So I think that his frustrations were absolutely valid, and it would be nice if he and DeFrancesco had some sort of a man-to-man conversation away from cameras outside the track to settle their differences.
Yeah, Tanner. I think that would be a really smart idea for Scott McLaughlin and Devlin DeFrancesco to have a conversation. They'll talk about why do we keep having these run-ins and all of that. But but with the way things are going right now, in Devlin DeFrancesco and Marshall Poor's silly season up there, there's a chance that he may not be back at Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan Racing. But we know Devlin, brings a lot of funding. But if RLL thinks they need the funding and all of that, then maybe he will be back, but who really knows? But I certainly agree with what we were saying about Devlin, about the need to prove that he belongs at this level. And so far, we really haven't seen him do much of anything spectacular in his IndyCar career. And I'm going to bring this up again, talk about it in the past, but the only spectacular thing I've seen from Devlin is when he made that also move at the Indy road course around the outside, passing multiple cars, getting out front. I think that certainly has been the highlight of his IndyCar career up to this point. And I do think Scott, certainly justified feeling frustrated there, because it's been a real frustrating year for him. And he's just looking to try to end the year on a high note. Given where he's starting right now, may not be the day he's looking for, but he got 2 ovals to close out the season, so maybe he can, find some luck there and be able to move forward in the best way possible. And one driver who's having, a frustrating weekend is Colton Herta. He's starting 16th and just not having a great weekend at all. And, whenever we come to Portland, we expect Colton Herta, to be strong, but this weekend, just hasn't really had it. So Matthew, with this likelihood of a win today Ford at number 26 Cambridge Honda Benz Slim, do you think there's a chance Colton Herta could go winless this season?
Yeah, I think it can. And I can't even say, because it's funny, I was having talks off the grid, I should say, is he is a guy from the West Coast, so maybe this is his chance. And he's done decent at Portland. Obviously, he's finished 4th here. I'm just looking at some of the results. 4th, 6th, 4th last season. But he's very – I don't know the word to describe Colton Herta in IndyCar. I feel like he's very, very hit or miss. And this year has just been a complete mess. I mean, he's still having a decent season, to say the least. I mean, he's currently 7th in the standing. Last year, he was obviously 1 spot away from a championship. But then the 2 previous seasons, he was 10th in the standing. And then before that, he was 5th, 3rd, and 7th. So his career trajectory is kind of like that. And it's currently right now down. So for him, I think it's likely he can go winless. However, the way motorsports is, I wouldn't doubt it if he could somehow win at either Nashville or I think we'll see. But I do think he's the likelihood of a win is very, very slim for Colton Herta, and I think it's going to be his second time in 3 years without a victory.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a very hard luck campaign for Colton Herta this season, and I just don't see that ending this week, especially with that 16th starting spot. Not only that, I just feel that the Andretti team in general hasn't really shown the strength that they need at certain points this season. Obviously, Kirkwood does have his 3 victories this season, but at the same time, it doesn't look like Marcus Ericsson has been anywhere to be seen this season, and Herta, as we've discussed, has had his several issues. It just seems that Andretti is failing to keep up with the Chip Ganassi racing team, and I just don't foresee them grabbing another win before this year is out unless they have a solid showing at Milwaukee. But at the same time, we got to remember in the series return to Nashville last season, Herta did get a win and vaulted himself up in the point standings as a result. So don't be too surprised if he goes out and wins one of the last 2 races, but this week it's certainly not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I think you both said it very well. To Matthew's point, not only has Colton's career in this series kind of been up and down, but this season itself, on a micro level, he started at the Indianapolis 500, he was 14th. Then he had some podiums. I do think that he's starting a little too far back today. I don't foresee him being able to make a climb to the front, especially trying to secure his 4-time IndyCar championship today. But I agree with you, Tanner. I would love to see Colton have a good season, especially because I feel like Nashville was a surprise last year, so it'd be great to see him go out to Milwaukee or Nashville and bring some of that magic back.
I have a feeling Colton Herta is, going to end up going winless this season, which is, unfortunate for him because Colton Herta's IndyCar career, it's been like up and down, like a really, bumpy wave. And because I remember at one point many people consider him to be the next American hopeful to be in Formula One. And everyone was like, Colton Herta needs to be in Formula One. He's going to be, the guy to represent the United States at the pinnacle of motorsports, and then we all know what happened with the super license debacle and all of that. And then as the years have, gone on, I guess the star on, I guess the light, in Colton Herta's star has kind of dimmed quite a bit. And when Cadillac F1 announced their program coming on board for 2026, Colton Herta was one of the names mentioned, that who could potentially get one of those seats. And as the months have gone on, Colton Herta's name is not even in those conversations. So unfortunately, it looks like, Colton Herta's Formula One dreams, more than likely at this point, probably not going to happen. But in regards to his IndyCar prospects, I certainly think, he has potential, to go out there and win races. But I think it's not just Colton Herta. I think it's a whole bunch of things. I think, the execution for that number 26 team, hasn't been the greatest, all things considered. And then, Andretti is packaged for certain tracks, it's just not good at all. And looking at, qualifying and all of that, I think we can certainly say we expected a lot more from Andretti here. You see, you got Colton Herta there in 13th. You got who was that? Oh yeah, Marcus Ericsson in 10th. And you got Kyle Kirkwood, starting just inside of the top 20. And I think they brought up the point on the broadcast. I think it was on the broadcast yesterday that it was, really surprising to see, Andretti this far down, considering they tested here at Portland. And you think, with the notebook in their, additional notes in their bag to go along with last year's race, that they would certainly do a lot better and be and be ready for this race weekend. But, unfortunately, the speed just hasn't been there. So I think, if Colton Herta does go winless this season, it's not just a Colton Herta thing. It's a thing across the board at Andretti Global, whose performance, across the board hasn't been as great despite Kyle Kirkwood, being able to find victory lane this year. So I think Andretti, in general, that number 26 team, they have a lot to think about over the offseason as they try to get back on form, with all three of their drivers in 2026. And with that said, just over an hour in, it's time for Pick a Winner, and then we'll switch over to NASCAR with Tanner and Matthew. So if you're watching here live or later on replay before the green flag, comment with who you think will win the BitNow.com Grand Prix of Portland, presented by Ask ROI. And Emily, I'm going to start off with you on this one. Who do you think is going to win the Grand Prix of Portland today?
Well, I feel like because the last time I was all together with you gentlemen, I very boldly said Santino Ferrucci, and all of your reactions were just too classic. But I'm not going to do that today, although I would love to see Santino climb his way like the goat he is from 21st to win this bad boy. I'm going with Pato O'Ward. I would love to see this championship hunt continue to go on for at least till Milwaukee. So Pato O'Ward, I'm locking him in.
I think I'm going to stick with Emily here and go with Pato O'Ward as well.
I'm going to go with the guy who won here from 5th 2 years ago, Alex Palou. I think is going to cap it off here.
Yeah, all great picks. And I'm going to go with the pole sitter. Pato O'Ward. I almost said Alex Palou since he's been on pole so much this year. Yeah, great save there. But yeah, and plus, like I say, I'm really tired, guys. So bear with me. I certainly think Pato O'Ward, if he's able to get the clean air and execute perfectly all day long on pit stops with strategy, I certainly don't see why he can't keep the number 5 Aaron McLaren Chevrolet up front and win this year's Grand Prix of Portland to keep the championship battle going on at least for one other round. And that concludes the part of our IndyCar pre-race show segment. So Emily and I will head backstage for now. And Tanner and Matthew, take it away with NASCAR. Got some road course races today in the Fingers Lake region of upstate New York at Watkins Glen International.
Indeed we do, Kobe. And thank you, Kobe and Emily, for joining us. And prior to that, Nicole and Joe for joining us from Portland. So now we're heading over to Watkins Glen, where everybody is chasing Shane Van Gisbergen. The quest to beat SVG is on top of every driver's mind as we head to 90 laps in Watkins Glen. SVG has 3 wins this season and is currently seeking a 4th, and realistically, this is probably his best opportunity to get that win prior to the end of the regular season in Daytona in a few weeks. Right now, with wins, SVG is still in the top 5 in the playoff bracket based on his wins. So, Matthew, for SVG, is this a weekend he can go all out and be extra aggressive to earn his 4th win of the season?
Absolutely, and it's my favorite track on this calendar, probably because I'm about 2.5 hours away. Absolutely love Watkins Glen, even on the video game, which you can kind of see behind me, my racing wheel, so let me angle myself this way. But no, I love Watkins Glen. Love to see what SVG's been able to do in NASCAR, and yeah, I think he has to be, because he's not points racing. Yeah, at least he shouldn't be. He should be playoff points racing. And I think if you're SVG, what I don't understand is flipping the stages in the Cup Series. And hear me out, it's because it seems like every time the drivers do, they kind of get screwed, for a lack of a better term. So I think if you're SVG and you might not have, if you're not having the best day to start, so maybe at stage 1, get your stage points, get that playoff point, win that stage. He was so far ahead in Mexico City, I think he still got stage points regardless of even pitting beforehand. That's how good he was. But yeah, when you've seen his luck at Watkins Glen, I was there last year in person, thanks to my company. I won a raffle, so I got to go there. My girlfriend and I spent the whole weekend watching ARCA, Xfinity, and Cup. Watching him, the Xfinity race, Zilich obviously won his first career race when we were there, and he finished 5th, SVG did. So, and then coming to the Cup level, he finished 2nd because he got a little loose. Busher got him out of the way. And then, obviously, yesterday, Zilich coming back on the track. I know we'll talk more about it this coming weekend with Ben Brandon, everyone involved with Grid Encore. But for that, SVG getting wrecked, essentially, whether it wasn't on purpose, but he got wrecked. So this is the one track Shane Van Gisbergen seems to not have a win at in road courses. It seems like he's won literally everywhere else except here. So I think you need to be aggressive, Shane Van Gisbergen, the ones that used to get penalized in supercars, even though obviously a penalty in supercars is nothing in NASCAR. It's obviously the way those series race. But yeah, he's got to be aggressive, Tanner. I really think he does. I think he needs to win fourth win. People always complain, well, he's got to win on an oval. What other rookie has won, if he does win, what other rookie has won 4 races in a season? None, all right, in the cup level. So, yeah, I think it'd be really cool for him to make history, especially at Watkins Glen, a track that seemingly, I can't say has his number because he's finished second at the cup level here, but it's the one he hasn't won at, the one that got away, right? So I think he's got to be aggressive, really put forth that effort, get those playoff points, and just be Shane Van Gisbergen.
Indeed, he's got to go out there and be Shane Van Gisbergen. As far as being aggressive today, my personal take on that is that he should do whatever he can to try to win within reason, because the last thing you want to do as the playoffs start to approach is find yourself in another rivalry and, have that in your playoff chances earlier than expected. Moving on to our next question. So, if SVG does earn his 4th win today, it will be the most by a rookie in the NASCAR Cup Series history, as Matthew pointed out. After Watkins Glen, the only other road course left on the schedule is the Roval at Charlotte, which SVG also has not won at. But along with the Kiwi, we have AJ Allmendinger, who does have a win here back in 2014, and Michael McDowell, who, though he doesn't have a win here, does have a road course win at the Indy Road Course in 2023 and has shown some speed not only at other road courses this season, such as Chicago, but has shown some flashes of speed this weekend as well. Chris Buescher, who beat SVG last year with a great pass on the last lap, that was during the playoffs. The pole sitter, a surprise to many, Ryan Blaney, who took the pole, obviously, with the fastest lap, beating Shane Van Gisbergen's time from Group 1. Matt, what other drivers do you see potentially stealing a win today?
Yeah, I mean, Tanner, it's hard to say, but you did mention a couple. I think McDowell can be a threat. I'm glad he's okay after what happened in the Xfinity race. He took a couple of hard hits there. First race back in Xfinity for him, funny enough. And then Chris Buescher's another one who I can't say the same in his truck race because, no offense to him, he kind of was irrelevant in his truck debut, driving for ThorSport, making his debut at Watkins Glen just a couple days ago. Those are 2 guys I would really say are the best bets to beat him, but at the same time, there's a couple guys I'm going to throw. I think Ty Gibbs can be a threat here. I know I keep pushing the Ty Gibbs train. He's very good on road courses, and I think he can get it done here. Christopher Bell's another threat. I really do think Christopher Bell's one of the best drivers in the sport, definitely within the top 5. So he's finished, I believe, runner-up or win in like 3 of the last 4 road courses, and then he was 5th in the other one, I believe it was. So he's a threat here as well. Chase Elliott has been in the top 5, I think, in 4 of the last 5 road course races as well. Still hasn't won one in the next-gen era, even though he seemingly was owning the road courses in the previous gen era, where he seemingly was winning like every single. He was kind of like SVG. It was like he was almost the favorite every single week. But those are the guys I think can steal a win from SVG. There is one, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to just immediately throw it over to you because I want to hear your thoughts. So please hear me out. I'm going to duck. One guy, he finished 3rd here when I was there. It could have been because of Rex. He was I believe he was top 5 in qualifying, or top 10 in qualifying, top 10 in practice. Guy who nobody seems to like right now, so I'm going to duck. I think Carson Hocevar could be a legitimate sleeper threat today.
I don't know why you're ducking. He was literally one of the guys on my list as well.
I thought you were going through the
camera. I think that Hocevar has crafted a reputation of being like not great at road courses, but last year here he definitely showed his talents by obviously being on the front row for that final restart, but unfortunately Shane Van Gisbergen put him and Chris Buescher in a bad spot on the opening lap there and was able to scoot away before Buescher was able to get back to him on the last lap. Now, as far as other drivers I think could possibly contend today, don't be too surprised to see someone like Chase Elliott find their way into the mix today. But I'm really interested in Ryan Blaney. I am not really familiar with him being a road course racer. Obviously, he did go out and win the inaugural Roval race under spectacular circumstances, but he hasn't been known to be like a road course ringer of any kind since entering the NASCAR Cup Series, and especially in the next gen era where he's been solid but not great. He does tend to find himself in a lot of accidents at these kinds of events. And speaking of accidents, let's swing it back over to yesterday's Xfinity Series race, because one of the things that can happen here is, much like at Talladega and Daytona, the big one. We've seen it occur several times here, and yesterday there was a massive crash in the Xfinity race that saw Michael McDowell and many others take a hard wreck caused by an over-aggressive Austin Hill coming off of a 1-week suspension at Iowa. That brought back memories of other massive crashes that have occurred here at Watkins Glen, such as David Rudimann's flip here back in 2011, as well as McDowell's own massive shunt here back in 2014 when he collided with Ryan Newman, and that was on the backstretch as well. On a separate note, as for crashes that happened outside of the vehicle, Trackhouse Racing has withdrawn the number 87 Red Bull Chevrolet of Connor Zilic, yesterday's Xfinity Series winner, after the young phenom broke his collarbone while trying to celebrate in victory lane. Slipped on his window net and hit the ground rather hard, but luckily he is in good spirits and will make a full recovery. After such a crash yesterday, though, Matt, with McDowell taking out most of the Xfinity Series field that was left on the backstretch, do you anticipate drivers will be a bit more give and take in that section today, or do you think playoff pressure will allow drivers to push the envelope?
Yeah, I mean, also I want to send my condolences to Zilic. Obviously, the kid has been one of the best in the world lately. Just obviously 11 top fives in a row coming back from an injury. So I'm wishing him the best. He's young, though. He'll recover. The older I get, the more everything hurts. But he's in a prime athlete, and I'm out of shape. But yeah, so wishing him the best. I think a big crash probably won't happen, more or less. I think there's going to be more aggression, because I think this is the last opportunity to truly be super aggressive, ignoring what Austin Dillon did last year at Richmond coming up on the schedule. So besides that, Watkins Glen, usually road courses are where the guys get their get-backs, more or less. And I think a crash probably won't happen because of the talent. No offense to what happened yesterday with pretty much what happened was Austin Hill drove a little wide, which a lot of guys do, and then he just kind of came back and hit McDowell. So I don't think it was really intentional. We'll talk about that next couple of days. However, I don't think drivers will make those kind of mistakes, especially, I think Hill could be a Cup caliber driver eventually, but these guys don't make those mistakes. I really don't think something like that is going to happen. However, I don't think there's going to be give and take. I think there's going to be a lot of throttle down, get out of the way. I think Zane Smith, if he can get near Hocevar, move him out of the way. I think I don't know how much I think anyone really gets near Hocevar. I think they're going to probably try to move him, and this would be the prime day to do it. No offense to Hocevar, but yeah. So I think the playoff pressure is going to push the envelope, especially for guys now like Chris Buescher, who I truly deep down think that if he gets into the playoffs, he could be a legitimate sneaky threat to make the round of 8. I think Chris Buescher's just been really good. Even his down years, which it seems like it's a down year for him, but he still would be top 10, I believe, in the standings if it wasn't for the playoff standings. So I think there is pressure for those guys who can get it done. Obviously, Daytona in a couple weeks, whole different story. Richmond, completely different story as well. But yeah, I think even seeing that crash, I don't think it phases these drivers one bit from yesterday's crash, obviously. So I think they're going to get pedal to the metal and get after it, and I think there are going to be some drivers that are going to be getting after it a little more, and I think Hocevar is going to be one of them. I think Buescher is going to probably be a little more aggressive too, which Buescher really doesn't seem like that type of driver, but he needs to. I think someone like Ryan Prix, who has been quietly good on road courses lately, which I think Prix has just been shocking most people. So I give him credit, props to him. I was wrong about the season he was going to have. So even if he was ever listening to this or it comes up in his TikTok reels or whatever, I apologize to Ryan Prix. But yeah, I think he could be another guy that's going to push the limit. Alex Bowman, good on road course as well. So pretty much the cut line. I could have, instead of yapping for that, I could have just said the guys on the cut line I think are going to be more aggressive.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I don't think that yesterday's massive accident will put any fear into the hearts of these 23 drivers that don't have a win yet this season. And I also just think that with passing being so difficult on one groove racetracks or road courses in the next gen era, that you kind of have to get the elbows out a little bit, so to speak, and get a little bit aggressive with some of the drivers around you in order to make a move sometimes, especially on the restarts. So I wouldn't put it past the drivers to get just as wily as the Xfinity Series was yesterday, in a series where you can actually make passes by, out driving somebody. Whereas with the next gen car, it does become a bit more of a difficult task. Moving over, though, to our Pick a Winner segment for NASCAR. Matthew, we're going to start with you. Who do you think is going to win the Go Bowling at the Glen?
I think most of us could be in agreement, but the only guy in Cup Series seems like history to have negative odds at a race. I'm going to go with Shane Van Gisbergen to finally get the Infinity Stones. I almost said Xfinity Stones, thinking because of everything yesterday. But the Infinity Stones of winning at almost every road course. So I'm going to go with Shane Van Gisbergen for today.
The Xfinity Stone. That's a good one. I'm going to also say that Shane Van Gisbergen claims his 5th Xfinity Stone and wins this weekend at Watkins Glen. The Kiwi has been rapid all weekend, and unfortunately for him, yesterday's race ended up in a cloud of smoke and sparks, but I don't think that'll happen today. I think the only cloud of smoke will be the one that he creates from drifting around the racetrack after winning his 4th race of the season.
I'm either going to look really smart or really stupid, and this may shock you, but I'm not picking Shane Van Gisbergen today. I'm going with that number 71 of Michael McDowell. I think Michael McDowell's going to shock some people and win today. Really like what I saw from his car in practice and qualifying, and then listening to him speak in the media center yesterday was really interesting in what he had to say. Not sure if you guys heard this, but he said he just don't understand the mentality of his competitors. They say on road courses this year, he said that most drivers just basically walk into the racetrack at a road course, defeated already mentally, that they're like, if I can just run behind Shane Van Gisbergen, that's a good day. So basically they're already, conceding to SVG. And McDowell say just doesn't understand that mentality that you have to go out there, and think you can win, because it's not, just he gave SVG credit, for his great attention to detail and how him and the number 88 team have executed on all of these road courses this year outside of COTA, and how that's what separates SVG. And McDowell said that he disagrees with the driver. He said the gap to SVG is large. He said he doesn't think it's as large. It just comes down to the driver's attention to detail and the team and the driver completely executing throughout the race. So Michael McDowell, he's feeling high on confidence. He feel like that's what you need. That extra step to try to get to him, that is the confidence to beat that number 88. And I really like how McDowell's feeling this weekend. So I may look stupid when everyone gets a point but me, but hey, I'm willing to ride with McDowell today.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. I don't disagree with that at all. But guys and gals, we had a really fun show here today, approaching an hour and a half. So make sure, if you're watching, hit that subscribe button and that bell icon to avoid missing any of our programs. We got a full set coming this week and next week, every week, pretty much. So make sure you tune in. I want to say a big thank you as well to our Patreon investors and everyone who has purchased a super chat or a buy me a coffee. Follow us on social media. We are truly grateful. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to have many people just going out to the tracks, especially today with, excuse me, sorry, I'm choking out. Just everyone there, Joe, Emily, Emily's here, so Nicole, sorry, but everyone there, right? So on behalf of Joe and Nicole out there in Portland, on behalf of Emily, on behalf of Tanner, Kobe, and myself, Matthew, thank you guys for watching, and please enjoy the races.